Welcome to Impro Talk. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Mike Rock from Impro Theater. Very excited about tonight's show, and you should be too. It's going to be fantastic. Panel discussion, the first Impro Talk panel discussion since the pre-broadcast days of Impro Talk. And those episodes will be available at some point in the future, fingers crossed. But first, I want to thank Christian, our tech, who's making sure everything happens when it's supposed to happen. And now I want to introduce our guests. Chris, you can put them on the screen anytime you like, but I'll just go through them one at a time. Cheryl Ferris is a native of Fall River, Massachusetts. She is an attorney here in Los Angeles. She has served on the National Board of American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. She was the first women president of the Arab American Lawyers Association, and also served on the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And she also happens to be an improviser here at Impro Theater. Joey Rich is an improviser at Upright Citizens Brigade, Nerdist School, and at Impro. He has been seen on television on Big Bang Theory and Mom. He is a native of Oakland, California. Way to go, NorCal. And is of Mexican and Lebanese descent. He went to American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. So he's a legit actor, y'all, if you want to ask him a question about real live acting. And Joy Mamie is here. Joy is an actor, an improviser, a designer, a teacher, and a stand-up comedian at the Pack Theater, at Impro, at Comedy Sports, on the Comedy Central stage. Joy does dialects. We might get into that a little bit, y'all. And she does impersonations, and there's one in particular that I'm going to see if I can get her to do. Also,
I'm so excited to know what that is.
And Nick Massou is here, Impro Theater's own Nick Massou. You've seen him on Westworld, on Lucifer, on Designated Survivor, on NCIS, on ER, on Private Practice, on Californication, and he is also, in his spare time, a life coach, and is a former director of school here at Impro Theater. Welcome, one and all, to Impro Talk. Thank you all so much for being here.
Somebody has done their homework.
Yeah, that was exciting. I was like, did I send the bio? That was amazing. Good job.
We're prepared here at Impro Talk to the extent that we can be.
Hey, that's impressive, where we don't have to write our own bios for
yeah, I love that. That made me feel amazing. Thank you.
I told everybody, audience, that beforehand that I once introduced somebody in a talk show in the long distant past, and said something that they did not want included in their bio. So before we started tonight, I said, hey, is there anything that you don't want me to? Anyway, but all's well. So it is. It's so exciting. Cheryl Ferris contacted me and said, hey, you've got this talk show. Did you know that April is National Arab American Heritage Month, and you could maybe do a tie-in? And I was like, well, let's do it. And then I talked to y'all, and it turns out, in a bizarre turn of events, everyone here is of Lebanese descent, which is such a Lebanon is this tiny sliver of a little place on the Mediterranean there, and is it a little odd that you all have found yourself at Impro in the same community? Is that, you tell me what you think about that?
Not only odd, for me, it's always really exciting, because growing up in Oakland, and you never had other Lebanese students around you. And also I was Mexican Lebanese, so I was even another combination that I'd never heard of until Selma Hayek came out. She's Mexican Lebanese, and I was shocked because the only other person was my sister. So, but whenever I'm like, so when people are saying there's, first I had a friend call me up and say, hey, I just found out Cheryl Ferris is Lebanese. I'm like, what? And then they would call and they tell me, because they're like, Nick in the company is Lebanese. So I was like, oh my God, I didn't know there's other people that existed.
Yeah, actually,
cool.
Nick was the first person I met at Impro, and we connected immediately about being Lebanese. And it is kind of amazing. I do find that, maybe it's because I'm Lebanese and I've grown up in this, but we very much get so excited when we find out someone else is Lebanese. And we like, when I found out that the singer Tiffany was Lebanese, Tony Shalhoub, like celebrities who are Lebanese make me very, very excited to see on screen. And then, yeah, getting to meet Cheryl through the DE&I committee and also Nick being there, we were like, oh, Lebanese trio. And now Joey, we haven't gone to chat much, but this is so exciting that we're like this cool quartet of Lebanese folks. Good job.
So when I first started with Impro, I met Nick, I was like, oh my God, he's Lebanese, that's so cool. Then I realized that he actually was in an Academy Award winning movie that I totally loved, the short film West Bank Story. So I was like, oh yeah, that's great. Then on the DEI committee, I met Joy, sorry, not Joey, Joy.
Okay.
And it was like, oh my God, she's Lebanese. If we weren't in a lockdown, I'd have you over my house and I'd cook for you, because that's what you do, right? So then we had this big, the anti-racism, huge town hall meeting and with Victor and Patty, and they put us into little breakout rooms. So we go into a breakout room. It's me, Nick, and Joy. And we just started laughing. Like, how did they know we were the three Lebs, right? So in the second breakout room, we getting started and Joey was there and I didn't know him. And I said, oh, it was so funny. In the last breakout room, the three of us were Lebanese. And Joey goes, I'm Lebanese. So yeah, it's a family. It's truly a family.
I love it.
Yeah, and I have a small confession to make.
Uh-oh.
I'm only part Lebanese. I'm half Syrian and quarter Palestinian. I think my father's watching, and he's Syrian. He's the Syrian side, so I have to really give him a little nod there. But culturally, I think I'm Lebanese. Mm-hmm. My mom brought the Lebanese side, and she used to always say, "Just tell them you're Lebanese." Tell me that.
My dad did the same thing.
I love that. Just a couple of definitions for our audience, because this show is viewed and listened to by people outside the Los Angeles Impro Theater community. DE&I refers to our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative at Impro Theater that was came to fore. Most recently, it's had a couple of starts in the past several years, but it came before most recently after the murder of George Floyd, when Impro Theater, like everyone else, wanted to become more aware of what's going on and underrepresented communities. And we've had some amazing people, including many of our guests, who have stepped up in the Impro community to become part of that initiative, serving on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Also, Cheryl mentioned Patty and Victor. That's Patty D-I-G-H, and Victor Lee Lewis, who are anti-racism trainers and inclusion and awareness educators. And you can go to pattydig.com, Pattidigh.com, and find out about the classes that they teach. Impro Theater has engaged them in a relationship for helping us further our DE&I initiatives and educating us. And so that's a very exciting development for our theater company, and many other theater companies around the globe have done similarly. So we want to give a shout out to them. Nick, I think is that a cedar tree behind you that I'm looking at?
Oh, I have it planted in my backyard.
It's really bright where you are.
Yeah, the sun never sets where I'm at here.
I like that.
Cedar, the tree of Lebanon,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's on the flag. I Googled it, put it up in my background.
I'm so happy you did that.
Yeah. Joey, I'm curious because I'm from El Paso, Texas, right? Which is right on the border with Mexico. And there's actually a very large Middle Eastern community there. And there's some who have come by way of Mexico, right? When you say that you're half Mexican, half Lebanese, are you Lebanese by Mexico, or are you like half culturally half one lineage is Mexican and the other lineage is Lebanese?
Actually, I'm half and half. So my mother is Mexican, She's actually, yeah, she's Mexican, a little bit of French. And my father is Lebanese. So they just happened to be, my grandmother on my father's side was born in Lebanon, but then my father was born in New York, and they met in Oakland, California. And my sister and I are the two children from that marriage.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, there is a fair amount of people who went to emigrated to Mexico, I guess, like maybe Selma Hayek's family, and then some of them then came by way to America.
Yeah, I've heard about those, and like growing up, you always wanted to. I always wanted to meet other people that were like us. Like I felt like we were the only two, and we we used to walk around. I used to tell everybody that I was Mexinese because I was half Mexican. So so it was really it's really cool when you like hearing about Salma Hayek, or like how Joy said, like my family used to have that too, like really like pointing out other Lebanese performers, especially in this industry, because it's hard to break into show business. And I remember like my grandmother telling me about Marlo Thomas, because that was the big one. And then of course her father being Danny Thomas. So it's a great example talking about D&I, how representation matters. It really it may not be a life or death situation always, but it really matters in like how you said, we get really happy and excited to like acknowledge and to see somebody who's gone before us.
And also, just to humble brag, because you mentioned Marlo and Danny Thomas, my dad was a conductor and a composer, and he worked with Danny Thomas for a number of years. So again, cool. We find each other. We work together.
That is so pretty cool. Amazing. Mm-hmm. Audience, Google Danny Thomas if you don't know Danny Thomas and Marlo Thomas, because that is a fantastic connection to old TV, old Hollywood, etc. That's amazing.
Or even the son, Tony Thomas, was a huge producer, and specifically in sitcoms, which a lot of people in improv want to do comedy. So he was also very successful in his own right.
And don't forget, Danny Thomas founded St. Jude's Hospital.
The best, yes.
Had such a huge impact for sick children.
That's an amazing organization.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That brings up a couple of things. One is the growing up with this heritage and sort of knowing about or having an inkling about contribution of people that you share this with. Was that ever present in your various childhoods, or in your childhood, this idea that like, hey, look at, you share this heritage with this person and be proud of that, for example, Danny Thomas, or maybe Selma Hayek, look at her in this movie. You share her. But I mean, was that a thing growing up that you were reminded of by an aunt or an uncle or your parents or somebody who just said, like, this is it's important to acknowledge this?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, Make Room for Daddy, which was Danny Thomas's sitcom, was mandatory viewing. I mean, the whole family sat in front of the TV, and Paul Anka, who is Syrian, but that was close enough, So we listened to his music and stuff. Oh, definitely, that was definitely there.
What about Casey Kasem?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that most people don't even realize that he was Lebanese.
I didn't.
Well, now you do.
Yeah, the list grows. Yeah.
I mean, for me, Tony Shalhoub was, but nobody needed to tell me, oh, look at Tony Shalhoub. But just I just was a fan of his work, period. And then the fact that that he was also Lebanese, just kind of added that sort of extra bit.
But one thing that is kind of interesting, because this is Arab American Heritage Month. So I grew up very Lebanese church, close with all my cousins and aunts and uncles, When I stepped out into the larger world, when I left Fall River, I realized that for most people, Lebanese, Saudi, Libyan, Moroccan, it's all the same thing. We're all Arabs. And the discrimination against Arabs is pervasive. It doesn't matter what your political stance is. If you're an Arab, you're an Arab. Um, there were a couple of really wonderful books by this professor, Dr. Jack Shaheen, Real Bad Arabs, REEL, Real Bad Arabs, and The TV Arab, that talked about the stereotypes. I mean, whenever we saw a movie or something with an Arab character, if it was a man, it was like a sheikh or a, someone dirty. Women were belly dancers, or they were completely covered in a hijab. So the images that come out to the public in all these movies are all so negative. Take a great movie like Back to the Future. Terrific movie. The bad guys in it who are shooting
the
are
Libyans.
for no particular reason. You could have made up a name. You could have, but for no reason, they're Libyans, right? So that's something that I've had to face all my life. As soon as I left Fall River, and even in Fall River, they called us camel jockeys, and worse. But that's, and there were no camels in Lebanon, let me tell you. So that's the kind of thing that I think is important, that is brought up and talked about.
Yeah, I was just talking the other day about Iron Man, and I should mention I'm a huge Marvel fan. I love the Marvel movies more than I just did a whole thing where I watched them in chronological order, and let me tell you, it was a good time. But it is, I still remember seeing it in the theater, and Arab fear was a big thing then because of the Iraq War and everything. And I remember watching it and just feeling really uncomfortable with the initial bad guys in the film being, portrayed as Arab terrorists. And then, I mean, I will say, I'm very glad that they also showed the other side of the people who are being affected by machines of war and whatnot. But I just remember just feeling uncomfortable that was like the first thing that you see, I should say in the first 10 minutes, it's the first thing that, impacts you as a viewer. And I also remember it watching Back to the Future, which is one of my absolute favorite films. When the Libyan terrorists come on screen, they don't speak Arabic. They are fully going like it's really bad gibberish in the style of Arabic. And it was one of those things where you're just like, oh, right. I guess you could describe this as a different time, but at the same time, it's not that different. It's still perceived that way in so many people's understanding. And it is a strange thing to also have to explain, like, in the world of being an Arab, the kind of Arab you are. People in our community have, like Nick said, tell people you're Lebanese. I've said this before to Cheryl and Nick, where after 9/11, we used to always call ourselves Arab Americans as well as Lebanese. And after 9/11, we were like, my dad said, no, you call yourselves Lebanese. Because, and it was out of a place of, fear. So it's one of those strange things where, again, representation is so important to see yourself on screen, and then to have to just watch how the world sees people like you. It's I mean, this is not a new concept for many people of color, but it is weird to think about in this aftermath of things.
Well, I guess it would be positive representation, right? Because if we had just terrorists, I remember a distinct point in elementary school when, I used to be so proud to always, like, people would always want to know what I was because of, I had sort of a weird exotic look. Like, people couldn't tell what nationality it fit in. Like, Mexican people would not think I was Mexican. Lebanese people would think I was something Persian or maybe Phoenician. Like, people were always questioning if I was Italian or Greek. And I remember a distinct point where it became where I started to have shame about being Lebanese, because all of a sudden I was being associated with terrorism, and that really hurt. Like, I would really, you know, I just wanted to hold back sometimes because I felt people, if I told them I was Lebanese, I was going to be prejudged. I was going to be put into a category. And I remember that distinct moment of going from always being proud of saying this, you know, Mexicanese joke to like really like, oh, I'm Mexican and Lebanese. So
that brings up a really important point in the performing arts, because Nick and I were talking for a minute about this category in casting, this generalization in casting that's sort of going on right now, which is Middle Eastern North Africa, Middle East North Africa, MENA. And Nick has been, you've been cast as a, I guess, generic terrorist. Have you been cast as a specific terrorist of specific nationality?
I've had the wonderful conundrum of playing a terrorist many times, but they have a specific nationality. Maybe I think I've done like Afghani. I've done, you know, all across the Middle East.
So I think what I'd like to do, I mean, I'm asking you because you're my guest, not because I expect you to be authorities on this, but help me illustrate for people the difference between me as a, you know, a white dude getting cast as a bank robber or a bad guy or a terrorist or whatever it is, and sort of like just how that is okay, versus the expectation that if there's going to be a bad guy in Iron Man, or if there's going to be a bad guy in Back to the Future, or if there's going to be a bad guy in whatever it is. In Die Hard, they made a joke, as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they say that they think that didn't Hans Gruber say something about he made up
it on the phone?
Yeah,
I can't remember. It's been a minute since I've seen Die Hard.
Yeah, didn't he say to the police something like, "We want our brothers in arms liberated from blah blah blah," and he just made up like an organization, even though anyway. So, tell me about the difference between me getting cast as a bad guy as a matter of course versus the expectation that if you appear to be Middle Eastern, you should expect to be cast as a terrorist, and like help. Let's tease that apart a little bit.
I think the main difference is going to be you're going to be cast as a bank robber, but another white guy is going to be a lawyer, and another white guy is going to be the bank president, and another white guy is going to be the cop, and another white guy is going to be the judge.
Right.
So it's a big range
right.
of white guys there. You know,
right.
you make that person an Arab, and that's the only Arab you're going to see. You know,
yeah.
unless you see his poor downtrodden wife.
Mm-hmm.
Who, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is equality of representation.
Mm-hmm. And also with a white man being cast as a bank robber and an Arab man being cast as a bank robber, the Arab man is being associated with terrorism. A white guy is a bank robber. And you know, the set of circumstances that are assumed upon what that means is that, you know, an Arab person committing a crime is doing it as also an act of hate towards America, you know, which is not the kind of justification that happens on the other side of things.
Exactly.
So yeah.
I totally agree. That's really, really good points on both of you. I also feel like, you know, when it's a white guy who is the bank robber, we're going to be giving his issues. What's made him do this? What's his personal grudge? Why, you know, something has happened to upset this white man.
He's desperate. Yeah, he's been
somebody has forced him to do this.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're an Arab, it's because you're a brown person, and that's why you're raised to get an assault rifle, and that's why you're doing it. And you're not, you know, when you're the white bank robber, you're going to be battling a white hero, right, to solve it.
And can I just point out the irony in that, in terms of how Americans are raised and the idea of what the Second Amendment means and stuff. It's like that is pretty wild. Like, I haven't heard it that way. So amazing. But like, you know, just the idea that it's true. It's you are trained to be an Arab militia against America. Like, that's the perception. When in fact, you know, people are striving to keep guns in our streets and in our schools and in our public spaces, people are doing counts of domestic terrorism, and people don't want to say it that way because of the person behind those guns.
Right.
So it is something that does very much upset me. So I thank you for letting me passionately speak on it.
That's what we're here for, Joy. Nick?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've played terrorists probably, several times, and it's been an interesting journey on that. I remember the first time, like my first job I was offered on, like my first real job, my first like guest star on TV was to play a terrorist on Bones, and I was like, oh man, I don't know if I should do this, and I called up a friend of mine who happened to be Lebanese. And I was like, what do you think? Should I do this? And his response instantly was like, oh yeah, you should definitely do this. And it was fascinating. And he's like, he's, from Lebanon. He's not, even though he's born there, he's raised most of his life here. And I remember taking the job, and then they changed the script from when I got it to like, from him blowing up some sort of political rally, which like, okay, that's what a terrorist would do. They blow up a political rally, to like blowing up a school bus full of children. And then I was like, ooh, I don't know if this actually isn't what terrorists do. Like the actual definition of terrorism, is more about having some sort of political agenda, yada, yada. So then I remember being on set, and I was next to one of the main actresses, and I mentioned that. I just kind of mentioned it, and I was just like, yeah, they changed the script. I was like, this just seems so callous and, a little ridiculous. And then lo and behold, the next day the script was changed again. So I don't know if she talked to them. But it's things like that, like kind of like talking about what is the bad guy's motivation? Because I was told a long time ago, I'm probably going to play the bad guys. I like playing bad guys for whatever reason. I have a thing about playing bad guys, but because I'm Middle Eastern, it means I'm playing terrorists. And so you're like, well, there are terrorists and they are bad. So where do you draw the line on this? And I think it's a lot about what everybody said. More representation. We need to see Arabs that aren't bad guys. And we need to know like what's their motivation. And I've seen movies and I'm like, this movie's doing it. Oh, we're getting to know this bad guy's motivation. Where they spend all this time getting to learn this bad guy's motivation, and it makes sense. And you see the sort of like gray area and like who's good and who's bad. And then in the end, he just goes and is going to go kill the person he loves and then blow up this like innocent peace rally. And you're like, no. Wait, you just destroyed it. You just went back to they're just pure evil. There is no actual genuine motivation. There is no sort of like, hey, we're on two sides of a war here, or we're fighting for our people. No, it's just they're Arab terrorists. They're pure evil.
So the whole in that scenario is sort of like there's this sort of structural pandering that's happening in the script in order to kind of make it seem like this is just a bad guy. And then it turns out that it's the same thing that's been happening forever. But in this particular case, they made this attempt to kind of like make you feel like, oh, okay, this is a different, yeah. Not cool.
It's true though. It's like, forgive me, but I was just gonna say it's the story behind a villain that we always find very compelling is because they have such a backstory and such a need for such a motivation to do things. But it's true. I think it's a dehumanizing technique where we don't give that backstory so often. It's just evil, it's just defined as this thing to write off. It's very frustrating to think, how many stories we could have benefited from to the opportunity and the creativity there.
We're talking about an area of the world, that if you include much of the countries that make up the Middle East, 500 million people or something like that. There are a lot of stories, a lot of people who have very rich heritage, very rich family histories, et cetera, and those whose family members have ended up in America, in North America, et cetera, have a vast array of stories that could be told. Can we talk just for a second about I'm not going to be able to phrase this exactly the way I'd like, but the responsibility of media, of television and film specifically, I guess, and theater to a certain extent, to work harder, go deeper, find more of those human stories in order to begin, I guess, untying the knot of this, as Joey said, you've got brown skin, so you're the bad guy kind of thing. Can we talk a little bit about responsibility in that sense? Do you have opinions about that?
I think we all have opinions, but yeah.
This is Cheryl speaking.
You mentioned my work with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. One of the major things they do is kind of try to be a watchdog on media, on news, stuff like that. But I mean, take a company like Disney, take a movie like Aladdin, wonderful, beautiful movie. Why does it start off with a song that says, we're in this horrible place where they'll cut off your nose if they don't like your face, or something like that, so the ADC went after that and actually got the lyrics changed to that song on the DVD. So yeah, I think media does have a responsibility, and I think we have the responsibility to push media. We have the responsibility to write letters, to be on shows like this, and to say, hey, we're proud Arab Americans, and guess what? Not one of us is a terrorist, although we might play one on TV.
I think it's also important to create the media, and like being allowed a place at the table to write, and like once you've written it, to get it produced and get it out there for it to be seen. It's funny, like as we were talking about this, I always wondered growing up, because I only had like my own Lebanese family, but if other men were like this. The men in my family are super loving. Like I always wondered if other Lebanese dads are like this. You guys can let me know. But my dads and my uncles, we don't shake hands. Even as a grown man at 40 years old, I always kissed my dad, and I always kissed my uncle. And that was just it was just an Arab kind of physical way, like, an American way of like American fathers only shaking their sons' hands because they were getting too old to hug and kiss, was, just the complete opposite of our culture and what a terrorist would be, like somebody who's raised in such a warm, loving way.
Yeah, in another example of that, I was working with this this person she was from Syria. She was helping me translate scripts. She was helping me teach me Arabic so I could audition for these different roles. And I would bring her these scripts, and she would read the scripts, and I need you to tell me how to say this in Arabic. And she would read the script, and she'd be like, "Oh no, that's not right. That's not true." And it basically was this guy was talking about how he treated women, and he's like, no one would ever treat a woman like this. This is not how it's done. Oh, this, and it's just this sort of image that American TV has that is painted in a certain way. And I was like, look, it's American TV, it's biased, and this is their view. It's not, it's not reality. But she was just like, she was very disturbed by reading it. And I was like, oh, and it was a moment for me to go, geez, yeah, I guess it's, maybe I need to be a bit more mindful myself. But the Arab culture is incredibly loving, more so than you could possibly imagine. Yeah, men, women, everybody is like, it's an open-hearted culture. It's an open door culture. Come in, you're a stranger. You have a place at the table, but you don't ever get to see that side of it. There's no stories that are showing that.
This if you do a little digging, if you do a little research, if you seek pun not intended, of course, but if you look for literature and film, et cetera, you'll find a million examples, if you look for them, of opening the doors, come in, have some tea, here's some food, this whole thing, when, and you can compare that to the skepticism and I guess almost fear of strangers that a lot of us grew up with, in America, like this sort of like standoffish, not really sure. We called it Midwestern polite, which means like you'll have that conversation about the weather and then that's about it. Whereas you hear many stories about the warmth of Lebanese culture and et cetera, bringing people in and giving them the benefit of the doubt and assuming best intentions and drinking lots of tea.
When I was growing up, whenever anyone came to the door, with cousins, uncles, whatever, my mother would say, "Ahlan wa sahlan, ahlan wa sahlan," and I didn't even know. I would say those words when I greeted people and had no idea what they meant. I thought it was like saying hello. And then at one point, I kind of studied a little classic Arabic, and what you're really saying is, although it's shortened, you have found a home and a fertile valley. Ahlan wa sahlan, you've come to us. And it's like, whoa, what a nice thing to say to someone when they come to your house.
Yeah. My family always, when guests would show up and unannounced, it was always considered a blessing to the home that you came to see us, that you came to spend time with us. And it wasn't about a holiday. It wasn't about bringing something. When you came, we were going to give you all that you were going to need. And it's interesting, like how, we had to kind of be taught in the culture, even though we are, born and raised American, both my parents, but it's like the concept of, no, call before you come. You don't just show up unannounced. It's like, oh, really? Okay.
It is also such like, I always think of my Lebanese family, my Lebanese brethren, as just so celebratory. Like it's always a party, especially like when multiple people, Lebanese people get together. I always found it funny, the concept of like, I shouldn't say funny, but just I didn't understand the concept of like families like who keep it all inside, they just like suppress their emotions, keep them down. Like that is not my experience of a human. It's always been very much like the moment you walk into a group of people, hey, like very, very loud and joyous, not to use my name in an adjective. I rarely say the word joy outside of my name, so that was a strange experience for me. Yeah.
That's what this show does.
It is.
Strange experience.
First time for everything.
I think
I was to like a family reunion in a park, and one of my cousins stood up and was trying to reach someone and yelled out, "Hey, cuz!" And 50 people turned around and said, "What, honey?"
Everyone's your cousin, everyone's your uncle and your aunt.
Mm-hmm.
There's no blood delineation.
I love that. Speaking of being welcoming, I learned something, and I forgot to put it into practice at the top of the show, but we're going to do it now. I learned something from my guest from last week, Diana Elizabeth Jordan, about being more welcoming to members of the community, the world community, the viewers or listeners of this show who are visually impaired, to do an audio description. So I'll say that my name is Mike Rock. I'm a white man with short salt and pepper hair, wearing a white patterned shirt with a dark red tie. And I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles. And if we could just go around the circle and do a quick audio description so that people, when they hear their voice, will know who they're hearing.
Well, I'm Cheryl, and I'm an older woman, and my hair is prematurely blue, but it kind of looks salt and pepper, but I arrange it that way. I've been told I have the map of Lebanon on my face. I look very Middle Eastern, although my skin is not very dark.
That's great.
That's it.
My name is Joy. I have short brown hair growing back from a long year of baldness, which was quite frankly very fun. But yes, it's now short and brown. And I'm wearing a pink and cranberry top and wearing hoop earrings because quite frankly they do a lot for me. And I too have been told I look very ethnic. Not many people know exactly where I'm from. When I say Lebanese, they're like, oh, of course, but their first guesses are usually Italian, Jewish, Latina, many other things that I am very honored to be look like, but I'm Lebanese.
Thanks, Joy.
Yeah.
I'm Joey. I am a middle-aged man, I would say, and I have short brown hair, and I have a mixed look, I guess, because of my heritage. And, when I go to Greece, everybody starts talking to me in Greek. When I was in Portugal, people spoke to me in Portuguese. So, I have one of those faces that can look like a lot of different countries. Unlike Cheryl's Lebanese face, I have a world map here, I guess.
Great.
I think casting calls that ethnically ambiguous. Is
Yeah,
what
see, that's my
category. Although I don't know if they use that category very much, but I fell under the ethnically ambiguous category. Though when, I'm currently have a beard on right now, so that definitely really makes me more specific. Hair combed to the side, over exposed lighting on my forehead, a little shiny, and a backdrop of a cedar tree.
Thank you. So now folks who are listening can associate your voice with what you look like, which is wonderful. I did want to talk about that phrase, ethnically ambiguous. Joy uses it on her website, and it is still very much in use in my experience. I've seen it quite a bit. I'm as ethnically ambiguous as a Midwestern white-looking dude can be, which is to say zero ethnically ambiguous. But let's talk a little bit about that that concept. Is it can it be both good and in other cases bad when someone makes an assumption? I know that I have friends who have said, and I've certainly heard it in the wider culture, why do you need to ask me, quote unquote, where I'm from? I'm from Los Angeles, or I'm from Minneapolis, or wherever it is that someone's from. When you know secretly that what they mean is, what's your heritage? So let's pick apart that ethnically ambiguous and quote unquote, where are you really from issue? Is there anything positive to be said about it, et cetera? Who wants to?
I do find the positive for me with ethnically ambiguous is that I am two different nationalities. So it does make me somewhat happy. Like the things that used to bug me were on forms where you could mark one. So I either get to choose my mother, Mexican, or I get to choose my father, Lebanese, but I am both. I am 50-50. So it bothers me, like on those forms, when you click one, how it clicks off the other one. So at least, in casting, I like, and then, my mother was Mexican and French, and my father, it was Lebanese and Yugoslavian. So, even though we identify with the races that they were raised as more than what my mother's last name is French and my father's last name is Yugoslavian. So that's why those get brought up. But other than that, the way we were raised nationality wise was Mexican and Lebanese. So I kind of liked that it wasn't, so specific that you could only be one thing. It's hard for people who have a big, I want to be celebrated. Like I had so much diversity growing up in different cultures. And so that's what I would say is the positive.
Yeah.
I think it's a tricky thing because I don't think it's negative, but I do think it does have moments of sticky situations in terms of depending on what the casting is asking of. Like in terms of like a commercial ethnically ambiguous, I find absolutely fine if it's a, you know, a family that's diverse and different, and because there's so many different types of families. But there is something strange about being told I could be Latina or Latinx when I'm not. And also in improv, you know, I struggled for a while because I would be not initiated. I would be given the gift, quote unquote, of a nationality that I'm not, and so it would put me into a position where I felt like I should do that. What my understanding of that would be, which I've learned is problematic on both parts of that for me and the person casting me, I guess. There's a term I'm trying to look for in improv and it's just not coming in my brain.
Endowing, or
endowing, thank you.
Yeah.
And endowing me as a nationality that I'm not. So it's one of those things where I do find it important to say, like, yes, I'm ambiguous because I'm not, because though my skin is light and white, I'm not Caucasian. So it's again, it's an odd place to be, but I don't know. I would like to get the jobs, is why I put it on my website. So
Sure.
I would just, that's the main goal.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like Joy's word. It's tricky. I've been in situations where I would rather not have people know that I was an Arab American because it would be a little uncomfortable. Not that I'm not proud of it, but it's just an uncomfortable situation. People will frequently assume that I'm Jewish, for example. And sometimes I'll just let that go right along because it's a more comfortable situation. In fact, I was in one situation where someone assumed I was Jewish and he was talking to me and I said, oh, but no, I'm Lebanese. He literally stood up and said, oh, and I thought we could be friends, and walked away.
Yikes.
Wow.
Yikes. Yeah. Yikes. So it is tricky. Yeah, I've had more than one experience like that. So
yeah, you know, it's interesting. There's a couple things on this. I mean, one, there's the, like what Cheryl's talking about, which is sort of the everyday experience of having to answer that question. And then there's, you know, what Joy and Joey were talking about, was the sort of industry thing of like being ethnically ambiguous, which you would think is a positive in the industry, but because it allows you. I used to think, well, I could play anything, right? But Hollywood didn't think so very quickly, especially after 9/11, which was kind of early on in my career anyway. So it's hard for me to know the difference. If once you're Middle Eastern, you're Middle Eastern. That's it. And I think, you know, there's exceptions to that rule. They're definitely, like, Tony Shalhoub is not stereotyped to playing Middle Eastern characters, but and I've definitely played some characters that aren't, but it's no longer can I play that line of ambiguity. And then now these days, it's very much, there's a strong movement to play your heritage, and only that heritage can play that role. And I think that's got pluses and minuses. I think it's a phase. Who knows where it will go? I think there's a lot of pluses to it. There's better representation for actors, but then there's a lot of minuses to it because, you know, we're actors. You know, now I'm limited in my sort of range. But in the terms of like what Cheryl's talking about, you know, it's interesting because, like I was saying, I'm Syrian, Lebanese, and Palestinian. How I choose to say what I am is going to affect my conversation. And over my lifetime, I've always been very conscious of what I say. Now, my mother, like I said, always said, say you're Lebanese, because Lebanese is the least charged word that I could say. Because when you say you're Lebanese, they go, oh, yes, I love Lebanese. The food is great. Your food's so hummus, tabbouleh. You know, I've never heard somebody going, you're Lebanese. Oh, I don't want to know you. Usually it's the opposite. It's like, oh, I once dated a Lebanese guy, you know.
That I have to also say, though, that's the thing that I have issue with is the fetishization of any ethnic group. But I too have oh yeah, Lebanese. I dated a Lebanese person, or oh, they're so what's the word, exotic. Like that's a screwed up qualifier of a human being that it's a screwed up way to compliment someone. You know, it's oh, you're I don't know, you're not what. It's basically saying you're not normal, or you're not the the person I would typically, you know, go for or something. There's something that very much irks me about that kind of qualifier. And I understand that a lot of people do that for many different cultures, but there's a, you know, that is a thing that isn't, we're not avoiding of what am I trying, you know what I'm trying to say here.
But it definitely gives you attention one way or the other, right? So you can, I can tell, I'm sure we all can tell when people ask that. It's the same question, but it's in the intention of where are you from? So I've had, where are you from, knowing that like that it's about a racist moment. Like, where are you from? I'm from California, from Oakland, California. No, I mean, where are your parents from? My parents are from America. My parents are firstborn generation here. So they're still trying to get, like, it's not answering their question. And I know that they're trying to get some kind of label on me so that they could separate me somehow from them or from whatever a nationality that they need to hate, that they need to disregard, but they've already made me feel separate and other. And you can also tell when somebody is attracted to your look, like, ooh, where are you from? And, you know, that, you know, I've had it like, you know, I'm saying when I'm said like I'm half Mexican and Lebanese, I'm like, ooh, that's a good combination. Ooh, that really works on you. And, you know, sometimes it can be, you can take it as a compliment if you're, and then other times it just is unwanted attention where it's like, you don't care about that, you know?
An alarm, you caused an alarm to go off, Joey. I think your answer, Joey, could be, I'm married. Thank you very much.
And you know what? I shouldn't have to do that either.
Right? No, I agree. Listen, I agree. Yes, you're preaching to the choir.
I could, but I shouldn't have to.
Shouldn't have to. Okay. I'm glad we got into that. We're going to wrap this episode with some final thoughts for tonight, and then we're going to tell our listeners and our viewers that there is a part 2 to this conversation where we're going to continue the conversation. But for the moment, I just want to talk for a second to kind of wrap about something that you think you would like the random person on the street, or or maybe even someone who you could do a secret coded message to somebody here, that they have misunderstood about this idea that Joey talked about separating. I'm doing motions with my hands about getting to the root and separating you as opposed to including you. So something that you think people should understand about the feeling of being excluded versus the feeling of someone going out of the way to open the door and include you. Any thought on that, just as a human person?
I think it's interesting. Sorry, Cheryl, I'm interested in if anybody else on the panel has had this experience. When people first meet me, I've had it where that's when they want to know right away about your nationality, right? Where are you from? What's your heritage? Then once I've been in theater companies, once I've been around people, or I've had been friends with people, the interesting thing was having friends that say, like, get surprised when I would bring up a nationality, and they're like, "Oh, I just thought you were white." And I started to see that happen a few times, like when you become friends with people, like, or that you're just taken as a person, and so that your nationality starts to slip away. And maybe I feel like they say white is just like just an all inclusive thing, maybe. So uh, I don't know if you guys have had that experience. It was kind of shocking to me when somebody first said like, oh, I just thought you were white. I'm like, I thought maybe I'm losing some of my ethnic look as I get older or something.
Yeah, no, I think there must be some sort of mental state. I've had that same experience where it's like, oh, I just always viewed you as white, and I kind of also want to go. And that's not totally true, but I get it. But it is there's something going on there. I don't know what it is, but I this is kind of going back to what we were just talking about, but I think it's somewhat related. You know, the where you're from game, having, you know, getting I've gotten the where you're from game from people that I've known for a long time who didn't know, and I've made the choice now to answer the question. Now, I usually mess with them and I say guess, and the last thing they guess, they just stay away from the Middle East. They just stay away from it because they don't want to guess the Middle East. That's I think that may be partly why, Joy, earlier you were like they never guess Lebanese because they're afraid to offend you by calling you Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
Actually. And so eventually I'll just say a long time ago I used to say Lebanese or whatever. Now I just I wait for a minute, I look them in the eye and I say I'm Arab. And I just see their eye go. And it could be somebody I've known for a long time who likes me, but the first thought they have is terrorist. If generally speaking, that you associate the word Arab with terrorist, and our brains are associative instruments, and it's become associative. Now I continue to use the word because I use the word Arab because I want people who like me to go, oh, Arab means good person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. So for me, using the recharging your brain is what I'd say to people. When you hear the word Arab, it's not a dirty word. You know,
Absolutely.
how do you change your associations? You know, and I try to just, you know, try to be a nice person so that I can, you know, they can think Arab and they think of me and hopefully they go, oh, I think I like Nick, so I guess I like Arabs.
Yeah, you touched on two things that very much resonated with me in that, Nick. One of which, the idea that Arab is somehow a word you're not supposed to say. It's an interesting dichotomy in terms of how, you know, people whisper the word black. You know, like it's part of, I think, that maybe that Midwestern politeness of we just don't talk about it. We don't say the thing that is different, and when we do that, it gives us the association of black or Arab or fill in the blank means bad. And that I knew that from an early age as a kindergartner. I have a very specific memory of hearing black be whispered, and then and just, you know, looking back and thinking what that did to me in terms of my inherent biases that I'm trying to consistently overcome and reverbalize or reprogram in myself. The other thing that you resonated with me was I've always been in white spaces, fully aware that I am not white, and everybody else being fully aware that I'm not white. Not enough to know what I am, but to know enough that it is that I am part of a separate category. I always, it's like you're almost feeling like I felt too Arab for the white spaces, yet not nearly dark enough for the Arab spaces. So it's a strange, you know, kind of being a double agent in my own life. So yeah.
And I've really resonate with all of what you were saying, because I've been very involved in Arab issues politically. I've picketed, I've, you know, marched on the FBI, I've done stuff like that. I know I've been associated. My kid brother once on an airplane was held with TSA for 3 hours because
Wow.
he looks like an Arab, because he's darker than me. So I've been with that. And what I want to say is, I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm not a terrorist, Um, I'm as American as apple pie, and I'm an
Or
Arab.
pita and hummus.
I'm as American as Trader Joe's hummus.
Well, we'll talk more. I love all those comments, and that, Nick, you brought up implicit bias, and the whole idea of implicit bias, and the Harvard implicit bias study that's been going on for 40 years is the idea that that people unconsciously associate words, phrases, facial structures, skin colors, etc., with biases that they may not be 100% aware of. And you've described doing your own implicit bias test by looking someone in the eye and saying to them, "I'm Arab," and seeing how their face changes. And Cheryl had that very unfortunate experience herself. I'm sure you've all had similar experiences where somebody kind of like treats you differently and others you, and etc. Fully knowing that you're the same person that you were 10 seconds ago, which is a bizarre thing. We're going to take a 6.5 day break and continue this conversation next Saturday. For those of you who are listening to this in the future, there will be no break. You just click on part 2 of this conversation. But for now, for those of you who are watching or listening at home on Saturday, April 3rd, 2021, thank you for being part of the first part of this roundtable discussion with our wonderful guests for this conversation: Joey Rich, Joy Mamie, Cheryl Ferris, and Nick Massou. Want to thank Jennifer Epps, our chat moderator, and Chris Dion, who is our technical operator. April is National Arab American Heritage Month. A shout out to Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan, whose ambition and energy to make it official. It finally made it official, I think, as of 2019. And I want to say that when I look at Tony Shalhoub, I think of a fellow Wisconsin native. And we actually, I did get an opportunity to work with him on Monk once, and we talked about Wisconsin. We talked about a place where we both hang out, which was cool. So thank you all for tonight. And audience, we'll see you or listen to you or hear you next time. Thank you so much for being with us on Impro Talk.